One morning, you wake up and everything is still right where it has always been. The same room, the same rhythm of life, the same routines you've been moving through for quite some time. And yet, there's a feeling, a very subtle one. Hard to name, not strong enough to make you stop everything, but clear enough that you can't ignore it. You're still you, but the way you see things feels a little different now. The things that once stayed on your mind don't seem to reach you in the same way anymore. Conversations that used to feel close, familiar, comforting, now feel just slightly distant, even though nothing has really changed on the surface. And you find yourself wondering, are you changing? Or are you slowly drifting away from something that once felt like home? There's no need to rush into an answer. Yeah, you don't have to figure it all out right now. Just stay with that feeling for a little while longer, because the moment you begin to notice this quiet difference within you, it might be a sign that something else, something deeper, has already begun to unfold inside you. There are mornings when you open your eyes and everything is still there. The same familiar room, the same light, the same everyday sounds you've heard hundreds of times before. Nothing seems to have changed. Nothing feels out of place. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet space begins to appear. It's not emptiness. It's not a sense of loss. It feels more like something has opened up within you, a little wider, a little calmer, and a little harder to explain. You still do the things you've always done. You move through your day the same way. You step outside and continue the rhythm of life you know so well. But something in the way you experience it all has shifted just slightly. Things that once pulled an immediate reaction from you, now you simply notice and let them pass. There's no urge to hold on, no need to control or to understand everything right away. Just a quiet kind of awareness, as if you've taken a small step back and can see things a little more clearly. And that might feel confusing at first, because there's no clear reason for it. No moment you can point to and say, this is when everything changed. And yet, you can feel it, gently but unmistakably. A part of you has begun to see the world differently, not with less feeling, not with distance, but with a quiet kind of understanding. You're no longer pulled into everything the same way. You don't react out of old patterns as quickly. Instead, you give yourself a pause long enough to feel before you respond. And within that pause, you begin to notice more than you expected. You begin to see that not everything needs your attention. Not every emotion needs to be held onto. Not every situation requires an immediate reaction. This shift isn't here to separate you from the world. It simply allows you to no longer be carried away by it. And maybe, in some quiet moment during your day, you've already sensed this. Not through words, not through logic, but through something very real, that you are still here. But you're no longer standing in the same place you once were. And perhaps, the moment you begin to notice that difference is the very first step of a journey you don't need to fully understand just yet. And then, over time, you begin to notice something very real, not through a clear thought, but through a feeling, one that keeps returning again and again. The things that once made you feel like you belonged don't seem to hold you the same way anymore. They're still there. They haven't disappeared. They haven't changed that much. But you have. It's like a shirt that once fit you perfectly. And one day, you put it on again, only to realize it feels a little tight now. Not unwearable, but just enough to make you uncomfortable. The roles you used to carry, the one who always tried to keep the peace, the one who always listened, the one who stayed to keep everything from falling apart, now feel just a little heavier. Not because you care any less, but because you're beginning to see that you can't keep holding those roles without leaving behind a very real part of yourself. And maybe you've already started to change in small, almost unnoticeable ways. You don't explain yourself as much when you feel misunderstood. You don't stretch conversations out just to maintain a connection. You don't feel the same need to do the right thing based on what others expect from you. Not because you're closing off, but because you're beginning to understand. Not every space needs your presence in the way you once tried to give it, and not every relationship requires you to reshape yourself just to be accepted. There's a quiet kind of relief in no longer trying to fit into everything, even if it comes with a little bit of space. Some relationships grow quieter, as some connections don't feel the same. There's no clear break, no obvious ending. Things simply step back a little, and in that distance, you begin to see more clearly. You begin to realize that belonging doesn't always come from fitting into everything around you. Sometimes it comes from no longer walking away from yourself. There may be moments when you stop and wonder, am I changing too much? But deep inside, there's a very quiet part of you that already knows. You're not losing anything. You're simply letting go of what no longer fits the person you're becoming. And even if this process doesn't always feel comfortable, it carries something very real, a sense that you're beginning to live closer to yourself. Not perfectly, not in a way that fits everywhere. But honestly enough, that you no longer feel the need to keep trying to be someone else. And then, as you begin to settle into this change, something else starts to appear. Very subtle, but unmistakably real. Not a big event. Not a clear moment you can point to and say, this is when it happened. Just a feeling, quiet but steady. You begin to feel more at ease with silence. There's no longer a need to fill every space with words. No urge to keep a conversation going just to avoid the quiet. Maybe before, you believed connection had to be constant, that it needed sound, presence, movement, that something always had to be happening for it to feel real. But now, you're starting to see that it doesn't always have to be that way. Some silences aren't there to separate you. They're there to bring you back to yourself. You find that you can sit still, doing nothing, without reaching for your phone, without searching for something to fill the moment, and you don't feel like anything is missing. There's no emptiness, no sense of being left behind, just a very simple presence. And somehow, it feels enough. And within that stillness, you begin to hear more, thoughts that were once drowned out, feelings you used to overlook because life moved too fast. Small things, but deeply real. You begin to notice that when everything around you slows down, you start to understand yourself more clearly, not through analysis, not through forcing answers, but by staying with yourself a little longer. You may also notice that you don't react the same way anymore. You don't rush to respond. You don't rush to explain. You don't rush to decide. You give yourself a pause long enough to feel, long enough to see what truly matters and what doesn't need to be held onto anymore. And slowly, you begin to understand that this stillness is not emptiness. It's more like an open space, a place where you can set down what has become too heavy and carry only what truly belongs to you. Not everyone is used to this, and maybe you weren't either. But now, you're beginning to see that silence is no longer something to avoid. It becomes a place you can return to, a place that doesn't ask you to prove anything, doesn't ask you to become someone else. It only asks one thing, that you be there as you are. And maybe in a very small moment, you've already realized something has changed. You're no longer afraid of the quiet because you understand now, within that silence, you are not alone. You are simply with yourself, in a way you may have never truly allowed before. And when you stay in that stillness long enough, something else begins to emerge, very gently, but growing clearer with time. You begin to realize you're no longer listening to the world only through your thoughts, but through something deeper. You start to notice. You feel things more quickly now, not in a rushed way, but as a quiet awareness that arrives early, almost the moment you step into a space or find yourself near someone. There are places where you only need a few seconds to know you don't truly belong there. No clear reason, nothing you can fully explain. Just a subtle feeling, but one that remains consistent. And then there are moments when you feel a natural sense of ease. No effort required, no need to adjust who you are. Just a simple knowing that you can stay. Maybe in the past, you questioned these signals, doubted them, wondered if you were overthinking, or just too sensitive. But now, you don't rush to dismiss them anymore. You allow yourself to feel first and understand later. And there's something very subtle changing within that shift. You no longer need immediate answers to trust what you're feeling. You don't need everything to be clearly explained before you allow yourself to listen. And this doesn't make you uncertain. In fact, it grounds you in a completely different way. Because you're no longer relying entirely on what can be put into words. You begin to lean into a quieter place within you. A space that isn't loud, isn't rushed, but carries a quiet consistency that feels unmistakably your own. And the more you listen to that part of yourself, the less you feel pulled in different directions, less caught in passing emotions, less reactive in old familiar ways. Instead, you begin to observe more, feel more, and choose more slowly. Not because you're hesitating, but because you're learning to move at your own pace. You may not have a name for this yet, but there's a gentle sense of trust beginning to form within you, a feeling that you can rely on yourself more than before. And maybe what matters most here isn't whether you're always right or always wrong, but that you are returning to a part of yourself that has always been there, quietly waiting, for you to become still enough to truly listen. And then, as you look back on the path you've walked, you begin to realize this change is not a loss. You're not losing yourself. You're slowly letting go of what was never truly yours to begin with, layer by layer. The expectations you once carried, maybe they came from others or from an older version of yourself. The roles you tried so hard to hold, just to keep things stable, just to avoid disappointing anyone. And the stories you once believed that you had to become someone in order to be accepted, in order to feel worthy. All of that begins to loosen its grip, not because it was wrong, but because you no longer need to carry it with you. You stop trying to become the version others expect. You stop reshaping yourself to fit every place, every person. Instead, you begin to listen more closely to what you feel. You stay when it feels right. You leave when it no longer does. No long explanations, no need to prove anything. Yeah, just simple choices, but far more honest than before. And maybe that's what makes you feel a little lost at times. Like you're standing between two versions of yourself. One familiar, predictable, safe, and another one still forming, not fully clear yet. That space in between isn't always comfortable. It can feel unsteady. You may find yourself wondering, am I heading in the right direction? But if you stay with that feeling long enough, you begin to understand. This isn't confusion. This is transition, like a seed beginning to grow. It has to break away from its old shell, move through a stretch of darkness, before it can reach the light. This new version of you is no different. It doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply begins to take shape in the way you think, in the way you feel, out in the way you choose what truly matters to you. And what's interesting is, this version doesn't require so much effort to exist. It doesn't ask you to hold yourself together tightly. It doesn't ask you to become someone else. It's simply you when you allow yourself to be. A lighter version, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you're no longer carrying what doesn't belong to you. A more honest version, not because you understand everything, but because you no longer pretend that you do. And in its own quiet way, a more peaceful version too. Even if sometimes you still feel like you're between two worlds, not fully part of who you used to be, and not yet fully familiar with who you're becoming. But maybe, right there, in that in-between space, you're learning how to meet yourself again, not as you were before, but in a way that is deeper, truer, and perhaps, within this very subtle shift, a new version of you is slowly becoming clearer, one step at a time. And then, after everything you've been through, you may begin to notice something very subtle. Not everything needs to be understood right away. If you're still here, listening to this, and somewhere inside, there's a quiet sense of recognition. A gentle nod, without needing a reason, without needing an explanation, then maybe you've already touched something real. Not a complete answer, not a clear picture, just a feeling, that you're no longer standing in the same place you once were, and that might be enough for now. You don't have to rush to name everything. You don't have to understand every layer of what's unfolding, because some journeys don't begin with certainty. There's no map, no clear directions, only slow steps, guided more by what you feel than by what you can explain. And maybe that's what makes this journey real in a very human way, very personal, and not meant to look like anyone else's. You don't have to believe every feeling completely, but maybe you can begin to trust that you deserve to listen to yourself a little more, not to find answers right away, but to build something deeper, a connection with the part of you that has always been there, waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to become still enough to listen. And over time, you may look back and begin to see that the things that once confused you, the moments that felt uncertain, were actually quiet signs, guiding you in the right direction. Not a perfect path, not a straight line, but a real one, with turns, with pauses, moments where all you do is keep going. If there's one thing you carry with you after all of this, maybe it isn't an answer. Maybe it's a feeling, a sense that you are changing, a sense that you are moving closer to yourself, and a sense that, even without clarity, you are still moving forward. Allow yourself to slow down a little, not to stop, but to truly feel each step, because some of the deepest movements in life make no sound. They unfold quietly, in a place very still within you. And maybe it's right there, that a new version of you is becoming clearer, one step at a time.